Why does it matter for us as women to be really conscious during this time? What is trying to awaken? And how can we encourage that unfolding or that development? I'm going to make a case for what is happening right now and for finding the right resonant fields, the frequencies where you can resonate toward the future self, the future human, the future woman that I believe is in the birth canal. I'm going to try to bring what is now decades of work around this, the whole idea of the consciousness that's trying to awaken now into a fairly dense, but short overview. And so I think it's helpful to have images and some words to take that in. You might think about these times as an initiation. The Crone consciousness that we've discussed and a little bit here, and then certainly the emails I've been sending out, is arising. I think of it more as an initiation than just a magical phenomenon that's just somehow going to happen. It's actually like any good initiation requires the heat of the moment. There's something that will be left behind, and there's something that will be transformed, and there's something that will emerge. So there are a few factors I'll just lay down here. Some of you will know a lot about some of these, and some of you won't know necessarily or won't be familiar with it, but I want you to have the context I'm working with here, which is astrologically, we are living through a rare convergence of outer planar movements. And this is, just to name a few at the top level without going into the conjunctions that are happening and the various things that are going on, let's say, in the cosmos that I like to take into account, that it's not just the chaos that we're seeing in the world around us isn't the only thing happening. We have Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, and Jupiter, just for starters, shifting signs after, even for some of these major planets, after a few centuries, so a long time. And for all of this to be happening at the same time is millennia when it's ever happened before, if it's ever happened before. And basically, what the signature is of all of these changes through this lens is that it's the dismantling of external authority, dissolving false identities, igniting personal meaning, my own sense of presence on the world, and it requires, it's inviting, you could say, embodied self-sovereignty. Some of you will be familiar with human design, but it's basically the movement. It's a system we use that's based on astrology, translates through the I Ching into the body graph, the chakra system you may be familiar with, and the Kabbalah. In human design, we're moving from what's called the cross of planning. It's been active since 1615 to the cross of the sleeping phoenix on February 15th, 2027. And this is basically a way you could think about this as the background frequency that we've been living in as humans for 400 and almost 50 years is changing. And this year in particular is going to be so critical because it's not like this is just happening on that one day. It is already well underway. And this year is we're going through the portal. Are you coming with me? Basically, is what you could say the friendly universe is saying. Some of you will be tracking through the Chinese astrology, not Western astrology, the year of the fire horse. Well, that's starting 17th of February, and it goes to right before this big shift in human design system from embodied freedom over external security. That's what's trying to come in now is embodied freedom as opposed to external security. Truth, like really what's true and what isn't true, is going to get accelerated under the heat, the pressure. That's the fire. Courage is required, but not just recklessness, not just doing whatever, that all the things that aren't yours to do. And the body and the heart are going to be super important. And in human design, we would say the same thing. This is really an important time for the heart center in particular to lead the way. And momentum, where you could say the things that we choose to do, It's super important that they're actually aligned with our own meaning making. So there's so many overlaps. And I present this to say these are the things that we're not necessarily tracking. Some of you may be tracking these because we are tracking and seeing in the world itself right now the dismantling of many things that we've taken for granted. So, what's the transformation that's underway if we look at it through the lens for us as women? We are in the process of moving from a worldview that's been in place for a long time, way before, but way back in our lineage, from external security and collective obligation to inner authority, sovereignty. This is really important, and I'll speak more about this in a moment, and freedom, and not as a concept, like the concept of I want freedom, but as a lived experience of my own autonomy inside a field. Now, that is a new move. From planning and control, which was part of the other system, that certainly led to the creation of the patriarchy and many external structures that arose, bureaucratic structures, and many of the systems that are in place right now that have been wonderful, been part of we've enjoyed and thrived in. And that some of that system, the way that we've organized reality is going to shift, is in the process of shifting to presence and responsiveness, the ability to respond now, not through multiple layers of bureaucracy. From belonging through conformity. In other words, I have to stay safe. I have to be a certain way and show up a certain way and give up myself in this way. And I fall asleep to myself in certain ways. Uh, to belonging through a resonance that's grounded in my own truth, what's really true for me and what brings me alive. And then from a fear-based survival kind of consciousness, which has been the dominant, kind of undercurrent of this cross of planning, actually, in human design terms. Will I be survive? And I won't survive outside the tribe. And so I'm going to give up parts of myself to try to survive. That's that active fear pattern that's so alive right now in the cultural gestalt. And we have to get awake to that as not the driving force, but rather what we're moving toward is a kind of embodied aliveness connected to what we love, to what we really love. This is the movement, and I want to lay this out in our deeper programs. We go into this in a lot more detail, but this is just to say this is no small thing. Whoever you might hear talk about the big shifts right now that are going on the planet and relative to one another and to the beautiful earth system that we are a part of. This is one way to think about it through our own development as women. So I want to give you this as a way to look at the dynamics of transformation. And some of you will be familiar with the idea of, systems theory or complexity theory, with how systems grow and change. So if you have the vertical grid here is the expansion of consciousness, and then complexity increases, and then your capacity. And you can think of this through a cultural system, you can think of it through a family system, through a relationship, and through how we grow and develop over time from when we're young, right? And you're very little, you have a very limited consciousness. You can see certain things, you can't see other things. The complexity isn't there yet. The brain hasn't fully filled out. And therefore you have certain capacities that are a match for that. So the way that you might think about this, and I like to present this because it helps to normalize what's actually going on right now in many of our experiences, that has to do with this shaking up, waking up. So, we basically oscillate around a particular way of being. This is true, as I say, from when we're very little as we go through time. And then the life conditions push on us on whatever capacity we've developed. We kind of one day we're really great at it, the next day not so great. But then the life conditions get so much more intense than we have built the capacity to manage. that the system goes into a kind of chaos. Now, if we know that that's what's happening, that makes a big difference here because that chaos is natural. That's how actually the growth process unfolds. The old has to shake apart. Now, sometimes there's an external event that catalyzes the shaking up of the system. Sometimes it's an internal kind of event. I know there's something trying to change here. I'm something trying to awaken through me. I had my own very profound experience of this when my husband died very tragically 12 years ago, and my whole life as I knew it in the outer world fell apart. And it was an enormous growth moment for me. However, I had to accept, and of course, this was me living, this was the center of the second book, You Make Your Path by Walking. I basically had to live everything that I'd been teaching for years and be with initially this chaos, recognize this chaos is necessary. It can lead to a collapse path if you don't accept that this is actually what's happening. You don't stay with it, or a dark age path where you basically come back, but not very far back. You kind of just get me back to where I was before. Some people had that attitude during COVID, like just get me back where I was before, as opposed to the opportunity for us really to grow somewhere new through that chaos. But this is what's possible, which is a Renaissance path, like the new operating system emerging here. This Renaissance path that emerges, the new order, out of the chaos. All right, well, let's just say I'm going to trust that you can maybe put this in the context of your own life right now. And I doubt you would be here if you weren't feeling some of the shaking up externally that has you wondering how you can meet this moment, shaking up internally, wondering, am I going crazy? Why is this happening at this point in my life? Why is this, is it also confusing and is fear so present? This is to kind of paint the picture of what's moving culturally, collectively, and personally. And what makes the difference in a system upgrading as opposed to the collapse or the dark age is the enabling conditions, are the enabling conditions, the container that you have to hold the transformation. What I'm suggesting here, and what the whole the through line of this conversation is that a new consciousness is trying to awaken, and we do not know what it is yet. It is awakening. We have to create the space for this to awaken. We could call it Crone Consciousness. Sometimes I've called it the mystic sage because it is not a time, it is not just an elderhood. And the word crone, which is what we chose when we were doing the early research, is still a word I think has a resonance to it, but I want to name that it's coming in very young now. And what does that look like? Well, let's look at what that is together. So the mystic sage consciousness awakening, I'm just going to show you a few images. And maybe, you can just take a moment to take the images in as we go through. And you can tune into this one. What is this Crone consciousness? It certainly has something to do with a bowing down. I would say a bowing down fundamentally to the mystery, to something unfolding that we have never seen before, that is larger than just the human experience, that is connected to the fabric of being, not just the planet and all of its beautiful beings, but also the cosmos. There is something in this consciousness that is able to hold the feminine and the masculine, the yin and the yang together. It can hold complexity, a way in which we have the capacity when this comes online fully to be with the dark. I love this image as an expression of what it means to be with the fertile darkness in ourselves, not just the bright lights, but actually the embodied fertile inner world and Of course, in a yin and yang symbol, they're equal, the yin and the yang. But in our world, we have definitely been a bias towards the yang, as we well know. And we're in a phase right now where that shadow pattern, we are seeing it all over the world. Many would say, or at least some would say, and I'm one of those voices, that this is the off-gassing of the shadow masculine, not for its, the finale is not here. Those of us that are working with the deep feminine would recognize that the shadow lands, and now we have to do our own shadow clearing so that we're not contributing to that because we've all internalized the shadow masculine along with the shadow feminine. This is also a consciousness that is an alchemist. It allows for this beautiful transforming of lead into gold, the situations in our lives that just and I again can say from my own lived experience when losing really everything, that there's a possibility for something new to arise. But can we be sourcing this, something new, not from fear of I don't have anything, what's my meaning, I'm not going to contribute, I'm not going to be accepted, but actually from a self-sovereignty. That's the invitation. There's something in this consciousness that is about working with the rhythms of the friendly universe, the lunar wisdoms. Also, an ability to be with the suffering of the world without taking all of it on as our own. And there's something in this Crone consciousness. It's like I love this image as a way to, if you could just feel into it, of really coming up close to the sacred, being in an intimate relationship with however it is that we see the larger pattern, source, whatever language you might use, in which you are embedded. So that's what's available. That's where we're heading. And I hope you're feeling a resonance. I hope you recognize this already awakening in you. Now, Einstein had this quote everyone will know: we can't solve the problems of today with the consciousness that created them yesterday. This is what I'm talking about. That's the developmental upgrade that we would say that took us into the work that we do, which was 20 years ago, roughly now. My co-author of my first book, Susan Cannon, and I started doing the research around, well, all right, we're going to have to figure out how women grow and develop then. All of the human development studies had been done using men as the specimens. So is there a different way that women develop? Carol Gilligan was one of the first to really do that, and that was what we were looking at. What if this is actually a developmental move forward, or we could say an evolutionary move forward? How do we encourage that? And it became clear very quickly that we had to engage the full spectrum of our feminine and masculine essences. And first, for us, we'd have to understand, what does that even mean? What is feminine? What is masculine? So that takes us to the territory now that I want to lay out for you, which is the mysterial sequence, because as I've already suggested, the the dark, the unconscious that's the two-thirds of the iceberg, and some as some people would talk about it in the psychological language, has to be addressed here because the old codes for these ways of being that I laid out there when I laid out on those first slides what we're leaving, those are deep down in the body, wired into the heart, wired into the mind, and the DNA. So this isn't something we can will into being, the mysterial way of being. This is actually, we have to first of all do this and this is what the work that our research led us to, was how to do this in the most efficient and focused way possible. And this has it unfolds in a sequence of archetypes, feminine and masculine archetypes, starting with the mother archetype and the limiting belief encoded not just in the mind, but in the whole system. I am not enough. Fundamentally, deep down in the DNA, that is there. The work is when it's, we turn toward and we do the deeper work of actually metabolizing that shadow, is I am enough just as I am. And even as we go through this, just see if you can feel into how is the limiting belief alive in you right now? And how do you resonate when I bring in this new possibility? And then the hero archetype, which is at the other end of this first polarity, a very agentic masculine essence. Um, I have to do to be of value is the driving pattern there. I have to do to be of value. And when the work is done, this is what arises. I'm empowered to do what is mine to do. The real clarity around what is mine to do in the world. And it is not everything, and it's very specific. And this is part of the phase shift that I was laying out again at the beginning, because it's going to be extremely important now that we are landed in our own sovereign identity. What is ours to do? In other words, different than I'm doing this thing because it's the thing my father wanted me to do, or my friends thought I should do, or my husband thinks I should do, or my wife thinks I should do, or what is really mine to do? And then we move to the more static masculine archetype of the father. And this is the deep coding of I do not belong. I will do everything to try to belong because I don't fundamentally belong. And then this is what arises. You can just feel this. I'm at home in myself and I naturally belong. I'm at home in myself and I naturally belong. And that's true. That's a new code that we have to start spinning in our bodies, hearts, and heads. The other end of the second polarity is a dynamic feminine essence we call the maiden. I'm not free to express myself fully. It's just not safe. I can't do it. And then this creative wild feminine, which is this exquisite energy that was often misseen, I feel, as shadow masculine, but is actually a beautiful feminine essence. I am free to express my true nature. I am free. And just let that resonate in you to express my true nature. And then finally, the crone, which arises here is the last archetype in the sequence. I don't have enough knowledge, connections, or influence. I'm not the one. Don't ask me to do it. There's somebody else. It's not for me. I'm not, I'm not the one. I am an evolving source of wisdom, love, and power. I do not need to know it all. I am in my sovereign seat, in my seat as an alchemist, really playing my part. And what we discovered was once that crone archetype came in, we cleared the shadows here, that it became like a steering function. It actually became more like, and this is why the word mysterial arose, because there was something kind of meta that happened here. And what allows the crone, which I would say is or the mystic sage, however you want to talk about it, this archetype that's trying to come in culture now, what allowed it to come in its healthy expression was when we could do the shadow work with all of the feminine and masculine essences that were underneath it, downstream from it. It wanted to arise. It wants to arise. It's the evolutionary imperative. These capacities are trying to come online now. They are what are needed to meet the complexity of this time. Being with the mystery. We cannot know it all. What does it mean to really rest into the deep mystery? Non-attached compassion. What is it to be with the suffering of others without taking that all on, but being able to feel it deeply, not go numb and not be wiped out by it all? What is it to be able to speak truth into the world, our truth, constructively, in mutuality with another for the best possible outcome? And what is it to transform our lives, the systems we are a part of, to a higher order? To see ourselves as the alchemists, in essence. So this is our evolutionary emergence. I love this image as a way to picture it because the tear in the fabric is what I'm suggesting that we've laid out already, that this is the transcendent includes. Something is trying to arise if we're not patching it up and if we're open to taking the risk right now to invest in the emergence, not to try to cover it up, like an egg, a chick that's trying to hatch, and we tape it all up because we don't want to break things apart, but to recognize something is already shifting. How can we encourage this phoenix to rise? This is the moving toward the cross of the sleeping phoenix. Now, the phoenix arises from the ashes. So some things are going to be left behind, old ways of being, maybe ways of being in relationships, maybe ways of being in the world that no longer are correct for you. And that invitation is, in my opinion, going to just get stronger and stronger as this cycle unfolds of 2026 into 2027. Something new is trying to arise. But the parts of us that are in the unconscious, below the conscious mind, are not going to be on board with that. So that's where the container is really helpful to help turn toward those younger parts of ourselves, those codes that are transgenerational, that have been passed down in your lineage, and really do the deep work of metabolizing those. You could say yeah, that's the inner upgrade. That's possible. The community, the deep sisterhood is something that we really, really conserve. We know how to create the containers. This is what we've learned how to do over a long time that provide the enabling conditions for that transformation to happen. Well, we are each other's wisdom keepers, and that's our job is to create. We know how to create the container for you to become that for one another. We're interested in your wisdom rising, your love rising, your potency rising. I'm going to close with a poem, which we use poetry a lot in one of the beauty way elements that is so, I think, powerful in our work, which is that a good poem can say so much more often than just speaking can say. It holds the yin and the yang. And this is from Shallan Harkin, and it's called We Are the Myth Makers. We are the myth makers. Our lives are pens, writing with our movements, our steps, our actions. Every touch, the stories we're hoping to record into the world. What are the styles of relating we hope to inscribe? What is the tone of our presence here as we walk this soft earth? Women, what stories would we like to tell about ourselves, about our sisterhood, about our strength? Men, what stories would you like to tell about gentleness and power coexisting, about the great courage it takes to love? Humanity, what stories do we want to tell about the grand journey to finally opening our hearts to each other? Darling, it's time to put our heads together and consider how beautiful dare we make this world? How beautiful dare we make this world?